Well, as anybody reading news headlines knows, the U.S. faces a range of threats to our homeland, not least of which is a raging pandemic that continues to devastate our country. Looking abroad, the new long-range conventional strike weapons under development by America's peer competitors pose a severe challenge to America's defenses. Aggressive moves by China and Russia to seize territory and destabilize our allies and partners menace our collective security. These actions underscore the vulnerability of elements of our defense that we once took for granted. Our ability to leverage existing and emerging technologies and to work collaboratively with our allies and partners will go a long way to determining our ability to anticipate and respond to threats to our homeland. So with that as context, let me introduce our panelists. As the commander of U.S. Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, General Glen VanHerck leads the departments with primary responsibility for homeland defense and aerospace warning. Prior to assuming this role, General VanHerck served in multiple leadership positions, including Director of the Joint Staff. General James Dickinson is the commander of U.S. Space Command, the 11th and most recently established Unified Combatant Command. General Dickinson has had a lengthy career in Army artillery and air defense and has previously served as a commanding general of the Army's Space and Missile Defense Command. Welcome, gentlemen. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to have you join us today. And I'd like to start by giving General VanHerck the floor, followed by General Dickinson, for a summary of your thoughts on meeting the challenges of defending our homeland and way of life.
Well, General Deptula, thanks. It's an honor to be here with you today. Thank you to the Mitchell Institute as well and the Air Force Association for putting this on. It's a great opportunity to talk about homeland defense. Candidly, it's something we don't talk about enough that's dramatically changed in the last 5 to 10 years. And so I look forward to talking about that with you. You mentioned a complex environment. Absolutely, it's a complex environment, the most complex that I think we've ever seen. You talked about that. What I would tell you is two peers. We've never had really two peers, two nuclear armed peers, one with significant capabilities to strike the homeland now and one with intent to absolutely develop capabilities to strike the homeland in the near future. And so let me talk about that quickly. First, I would say we're challenged across all domains, and I'll let General Dickinson talk to you about the space. I'll talk more, but what makes this problem even more dynamic and interesting is how interwoven we are economically, especially with China and the challenges that presents for us as a nation. So let me give you a little bit of a take on how I view the battle space, if you will, and the threat to the homeland. Since the wall fell 30 years ago or so, we've really been focused on fighting forward. We've developed capabilities, strategies, plans, all with the assumption that assumed forward power projection was a given pretty much. And it has been. We've had a unipolar world with the United States really as the single sole superpower, if you will. But that is changing right now. While we've been projecting power forward, our competitors, primarily China and Russia, have watched that, and they've taken notes on how we are able to project power and military influence around the globe. They realize they don't want to fight that fight on their terrain in their battle space, and so they develop capabilities to hold the homeland at risk with the idea that they'll destroy our will to fight, they'll limit our ability to project power forward from the homeland so that in a regional fight they can get that objective accomplished before we can get ourselves into the regional fight. Some would question that. I would tell you in discussions this week with the intel community, I'm even more convinced that that is the case. And if you look at capability being developed, especially by Russia right now, and stated intent by Russian leaders, you can read that for sure. So you put capability together and you put intent, and I think you pay me to plan for such a circumstance where they might be able to attack the homeland. So where we are today, in my mind, we've been focused on VEOs. This command was born out of the VEO threat after 9/11. Initial focus was exactly that, homeland defense focused on VEOs and defense support of civil authorities for incredibly challenging natural disasters and those kinds of things. That changed after Hurricane Katrina with a Defense Supportive Civil Authorities mission. And then after the NDS came out, the National Defense Strategy in 2018, we're back to focusing this command on Homeland Defense, especially on peer competitors. But what I'll tell you is we have work to do because we still approach problems regionally. We plan, strategize, we manage forces regionally. We need to think about these problem sets globally. I think we're still too stovepiped with our data that's not getting shared in a timely enough manner at the operational and strategic level to have influence, deterrence influence, especially in the competition phase. I think we are very reliant and too reliant for defense of the homeland on our nuclear deterrent. Make no doubt about it, the nuclear deterrent is the bedrock and foundation for homeland defense. But there's a growing gap right now between the nuclear deterrent and my ability conventionally to deter and defeat. And that's where I'm worried about, because I need decision space for senior leaders and options for the senior leaders in competition, more importantly in crisis and conflict, so that we can de-escalate and, if required, to defeat. We need to think more broadly about our systems and our development. We tend to be focused in developing and acquiring things that are one-dimensional. BMD, for example, sensors that only support BMD. We have to expand our horizons much more broadly to think about capabilities as we produce that can not only do BMD, but they can give us domain awareness from counter UAS all the way to space monitoring and ballistic missile defense and cruise missile defense. And so that's where you'll see that we're going. I think we're too focused on kinetic in-game defeat, that we need to be balanced between a conflict mindset for strategy and planning and a competition mindset and creating deterrence in day-to-day competition. So that's where I think we need to go. I think we need to go to a global perspective, and everything must be viewed in a global perspective that starts with global strategies, global plans, global force management. Candidly, I would say that we're doing regional force element allocation. We don't have enough resources and capability today to hand resources over to individual combatant commanders to utilize for long periods of time. We need to think differently and have strategies where combatant commanders can share resources to generate effects, especially in the competition phase. So that's where I'm focused. Looking beyond deterrence by punishment, what I would tell you is deterrence by punishment is our nuclear deterrent. It is our conventional capability to leverage global influence and power. But both of those, in my mind, are too late in the process, and they're reactive in nature. I'll give you an example of what I mean by deterrence by denial versus deterrence by punishment. Absolutely, deterrence by punishment is our nuclear capability. But if you take our deterrence with our ballistic missile defense capability, which is deterrence by denial, and you put those two together, deterrence by punishment is the cost imposition of a competitor or adversary taking an action, and then their decision calculus, whether they can actually be successful of achieving their objective, and you put those two together, that's an extremely powerful deterrent. And that's where I'm going to be focused. And that starts with this domain awareness, which is my priority line of effort. That comes with sensors that are all around the globe, from undersea to space and cyberspace, that give domain awareness that is shared. And that domain awareness, much of it exists today, General Deptula. I'm not talking about highly expensive additional capabilities. Certainly, we need to continue modernizing and moving towards space as soon as we can. But much of the awareness exists today, but it's in stovepipes. It's not analyzed in a timely manner where operational commanders and strategic decision makers can actually utilize it for influence. What we need to do is take that domain awareness, put it in some type of a cloud mechanism, machine learning, artificial intelligence applied to it. And that's what I call information dominance, the ability to operate inside our adversary's OODA loop. Once you have information dominance and you distribute that data to the right decision makers, whether that be at the tactical level to the strategic level, that's what I call decision superiority. We tend to focus now, especially JADC2, and you could wrap a bow around what I'm talking about and call it JADC2 if you want. But we tend to focus on the kinetic kill capability, the in defeat, the tactical portion, for utilization of this information. I see the incredible value is moving further left, getting further left of launch, being able to impact their decision calculus during competition. That's where you create your deterrence. And then in a crisis situation, being able to operate inside their OODA loop to affect their decision calculus. And certainly in a conflict, being able to utilize it for kinetic defeat if we need to do that. I'm encouraged by what's going on. US Spacecom, General Dickinson and his team are moving the right direction for this domain awareness, and I look forward to continuing to partner with them. This is all about decision superiority and giving decision makers the opportunity to make those decisions and have decision space. Now, for me, I don't think we need to defend everything. Every piece of critical infrastructure is unaffordable and unachievable, but we do need to decide what it is we must defend kinetically, and then look for alternative methods, such as the use of the electromagnetic spectrum and deterrence by denial through information, through getting further left of launch to create capabilities to keep us in that competition phase. I'll sum it up real quick. I think we need to go faster. 30 years ago, the department and led the way, NASA led the way. Today, that is reversed. Industry and other agencies outside the department are leading the way. We need to change how we think about acquiring systems, how we think about moving forward with building capabilities and allow innovation that's being conducted elsewhere to lead the way and take advantage of that. That requires a little bit of risk. It requires Congress assuming a little bit of risk and the department changing our cultures. And so I'll pause there and allow General Dickinson, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Over to you, General Dickinson.
Hey, good morning, and thanks to General Deptula for having me today. Great day to be in Washington, D.C., and having the opportunity to speak to this group. And thanks to the Air Force Association for the invitation and for the Aerospace Warfare Symposium for hosting it. Always a great day to be able to talk about space. I know you've had General Raymond and General Thompson talk, I think I heard yesterday. And so I'm going to give you a perspective from the combatant command, the warfighter perspective. And I think it's important as we start that I always like to kind of talk about where we are with space with respect to everything that we do in society today. And that'll dovetail well into our support to the Homeland for Glen, VanHerck and his team. So really, you don't have to go back too far to figure out when space became such an important part of our military. But in everyday life, we see it with the GPSs that we use. That's probably the best example in terms of that capability that we depend on every day. Looking at your iPhone, looking at your Maps application, where do you get to? That's all been provided for many years to our American public, and it's very important, very important. And that's probably the most visible one, if you will, that we provide every day. But you only have to go about 30 years because we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Desert Storm. And I look at Glenn in the camera here, and probably you too, Dave. And where were you 30 years ago? And when all that happened with Desert Storm, and you look at the use of space for that war with regards to GPS, really the first wide use of GPS for the military. And really satellite communications. I think we had close to 80% of the theater communications ran through satellite communications on orbit. And even today, you make an argument that we're even more reliant upon space for our operations, our ability to forward project across the globe. And just look at the recent events that happened over the last 24 hours rely upon GPS satellite-based communications and precision navigation and timing. So all very important. We rely on it each and every day, and thus we need to protect it. If you look at the commercial space growth, amazing to see the growth in that particular area with more than 800 satellite communication payloads on orbit today, and the Starlink or the SpaceX's Starlink constellation that has more than 1,000 satellites in orbit today. And really look to the expansion of our cislunar and beyond. Over the last couple of weeks or last month, we've seen China's rover now in orbit around Mars, preparing to land in May or June. You got the United Arab Emirates Hope spacecraft that entered the Mars orbit on 9 February. Really the 5th country to reach orbit around Mars, to include ourselves, China, India, and Russia. So amazing amount of interest, as well as expansion commercially into the space domain. So really, protecting and defending it and those of our assets and our allies and partners is really the major role that U.S. Spacecom plays today. So if you look at really the strategic environment, and we know that it has changed, the competition with Russia and China, our American way of life that's fueled by our space capability. Space is now without question a warfighting domain. Our response as a nation has been very impressive and fast when you look at the fact that we stood up an 11th Combatant Command that I have the honor of commanding today, as well as the establishment of the 6th branch of the service as the Space Force. All of those two capabilities just in and themselves has postured us well for today and for tomorrow as we look to protect the homeland utilizing space assets. So if you look across our adversaries, Glen touched on it just a few minutes ago, but I'll talk a little bit about space. We know that China and Russia, our competitors, are really developing a lot of counter space capabilities. There's numerous examples of Russia and China deploying systems that can hold our U.S. space capabilities at risk. So the common question really outside of military circles sometimes when I'm speaking, I find is, so why have we militarized space? And well, the answer is we really haven't. Our competitors have. And our response to that is what I just described in terms of the actions that we've taken as a nation. So China has a significant capability, if you will, to deny our advantages in space. They continue to develop a wide range of counter space capabilities. And really, they're looking to hold our assets at risk. You just have to look back as late as 2007, if you will, with their on-orbit anti-satellite tests that they conducted. And they intend to continue to pursue that type of technology. So when you look at Russia, if you turn the page to Russia, last year alone, we saw the Russians conduct three anti-satellite tests, direct ascent ASAT tests, which can hold at risk our small satellites in low Earth orbit. More than ever, with those two threats alone, and I won't deep dive into each one of those countries specifically, but just kind of a broad brush that I gave you, that just highlights the fact that we need to work more closely and side by side with U.S. NORTHCOM and NORAD, along with our other combatant commands in the defense and protection of those capabilities on orbit. So to kind of wrap up, we do share a common history with NORAD, NORTHCOM. Back during Desert Storm, if we go back 30 years, there was a U.S. Space Command, and that transitioned from U.S. Space Command after 9/11 to U.S. Northern Command for all the right reasons. And so we do share a common bond in terms of our history. And as we stood back up at Peterson Air Force Base and being next door neighbors there with Glen, VanHerck and your team, we're working side by side to make sure that we are able to conduct the protection of the homeland in an efficient and deliberate manner. So again, thanks for having me today. I look forward to your questions.
Well, very good, gentlemen. Thank you very much for those summary remarks. And General Dickinson, yeah, I remember exactly where I was 30 years ago today because I was the Chief Offensive Air Campaign Planner for the air campaign for Desert Storm. So I was busy putting together attack plans for the next 24 hours. And actually on this date, we were in the wrap-up, the final 4 days where ground forces went into Kuwait to reestablish the occupancy of the rightful sovereign owners of that state. And as General Horner used to say, Desert Storm was the first space war. Now, that might have been a little bit of an exaggeration, but it certainly started things because those GPS systems that you mentioned actually guided those tanks and armor vehicles out in that featureless desert. So it's a good reminder to show just how integral space is in all of our military operations, and certainly more so today than ever before in the past. Well, let's dig down a little bit deeper into this topic area, and let me start with a question to you, General VanHerck. In a speech last fall, you made the point that when it comes to defending against hypersonic weapons, we need to start thinking of homeland defense in terms of deterrence by denial. Can you elaborate a bit on this point? And how should the pace of technological development determine the U.S. military's response?
Well, thanks, General Deptula. Sure. So I do remember that speech, and it was a symposium on hypersonics, where the majority of hypersonics discussion was around offensive capabilities. And I wanted to flip-flop the discussion a little bit and think about defensive capabilities specific of our homeland from hypersonics, which are being fielded both by Russia and China as we speak, or have been fielded. From a defensive perspective, it concerns me to basically, with my NORAD hat, be able to provide attack assessment and warning. We'll get that initially, but the attack assessment and in-game defeat of hypersonics is a significant challenge, and General Dickinson will tell you that. We're working closely with John Hill at the MDA as well to get after this. But I believe, as I earlier said, a lot like BMD, generating capabilities that puts doubt in their mind about achieving their objective by striking either nuclear or conventional. Hypersonics delivered nuclear payload. I'm a firm believer that our nuclear deterrent is the deterrence by that. But conventional payloads, we need to think further left. We need to be inside the OODA loop. We need to be able to posture forces and message to create doubt in their mind about utilizing these capabilities to attack the homeland to achieve their objectives. And so that's what I really mean by deterrence by denial. It's doubt about the success that they can actually achieve ultimately. And when you combine both those, as I said earlier, that's extremely powerful. With regards to the pace of technological development, absolutely we should be utilizing and pacing with technological development in commercial industry. And we're going in the right direction. We're not going fast enough for me. And what we need to do is go faster, or we run the risk of our competitive advantage eroding or continue to erode. I'm not going to say we're a peer in every domain with China and Russia, but certainly in many domains we are. But that'll continue to erode if we don't utilize technological developments that are ongoing within the commercial sector, especially in Silicon Valley and many of our defense industrial partners. And so it's clear we have to go much faster. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, thanks very much. Let's turn to General Dickinson. A few weeks ago, U.S. Spacecom published your commander's strategic vision document, in which you noted that our homeland defense increasingly relies on space. Could you go into just a bit more detail about Spacecom's role in defense of the homeland?
Well, thanks, Dave. Yes, absolutely. Got that new strategic vision out on the street, and I'm glad that it's picking up some traction. I will tell you that I think there's a direct correlation between the security of the U.S. and our ally assets in space and the homeland security. They are inseparably dependent, I think, upon that. I mean, I just, in my opening comments, talked a little bit about our increasing economic dependence on space capabilities, and that's in line with our military dependence as well on space capabilities. So, you know, when you look at our ability to provide that to the warfighter, you know, some of those examples include position, navigation, and timing. And as you mentioned, GPS and Desert Storm, I've got a few stories myself on that in terms of what was provided to us, very elementary at the time, but absolutely a combat multiplier. But we have PNT, we have missile warning, we provide search and rescue information, things that something we don't talk about a lot, but we need to, is the fact that we provide Glen some humanitarian assistance and disaster relief support, satellite communications, weather forecasting, climate monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very important that we understand, you know, how critical that is to our way of life here in the United States and around the world. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've got our adversaries, our competitors, trying to hold those capabilities at risk. So really, I think defending of our space capabilities, and that's the mission we have been given to protect and defend, is therefore critical to the defense of the homeland for both the American way of life and for that of our ability to defend ourselves.
Well, thanks very much for that. And I think it's pretty incredible how ubiquitous space has become across the board. And it is something that is just simply accepted as being there. And I think it's extraordinarily important that U.S. Space Command has been reestablished with a focus on defending those capabilities, because they are so critical to U.S. Not just national security interest, but day-to-day living by each and every one of the citizens of the United States. General VanHerck, last month, NORAD tracked 2 Russian maritime patrol aircraft that entered the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. Now, we all know that this isn't something new, that in fact NORAD last year conducted more intercepts of Russian aircraft than it has in many years. Why do you think the number of Russian interceptors has increased, or intrusions have increased? And what's Russia seeking to gain from engaging in this kind of behavior?
General Deptula, I'll answer that last question first. They're trying to establish norms and deterrence. This is the competition that I alluded to earlier in my opening remarks, and that's exactly what Russia's doing. Over the last few years, they've modernized their force. They've continued to build infrastructure and capabilities in the Arctic, and what they're doing is they're establishing what they would feel are norms and standard operating kind of procedures, and trying to flex their muscles and regain prominence, if you will, on an international platform. As far as why this is happening, that's one reason. I would say that the second reason, and this is really important to point out, is I talk about the global nature of competition today. And I'll give you an example. As you well know, we've changed how we do our bomber operations, and we did continuous bomber presence for 16 years or so. Now we're doing bomber task force missions, and they've been very, very successful. They've increased the readiness of our global strike forces. They've given combatant commanders around the globe the opportunity to have effects and influence on a more recurring basis, as the department has asked for through dynamic force employment. What I would tell you is the global nature of that problem. What you see is, as General Walters or Admiral Davidson utilizes a bomber task force for influence in their AOR, you'll see an equal opportunity or response out of the Russians that oftentimes will occur in my AOR. And so I think you're seeing kind of a little bit of a tit for tat. As we have changed our operations, you see a little bit of that with the Russians as well. So it is a global competition. I'll go back to my point of thinking about this globally and understanding a global strategy and thinking about global impacts. The worst thing that we could have happen is trying to generate an effect in somebody else's AOR, and I have a strategic mission failure in my AOR. That's what we're trying to prevent. Thanks, General Deptula.
Well, staying on the Arctic area responsibility for a minute, if we can, General VanHerck, it's becoming increasingly clear that the Arctic is no longer the neutral buffer that it once provided. What steps is NORTHCOM taking in order to sense and respond to potential threats emanating from the Arctic?
Great question, and thanks for the opportunity to expand on that. First, let's talk about why the Arctic is changing real quick. Well, the environmental change is certainly creating opportunities for all nations to get access and have economic influence through either transiting through the Arctic or have access to the incredible resources. Russia, a large percentage of their economy is driven by access and influence in the Arctic, and China's wanting access as well, and they call themselves a near Arctic nation. With that said, what we're doing is we're aligning our priorities to the 2019 Department of Defense Arctic Strategy. What that requires for me is really persistence to be able to compete. I'll go back to that competition thing, is to compete in the Arctic. And what that requires is the ability to have persistence, and it means I need communications capability. Communications is incredibly challenging north of 65 in the Arctic. We're working with Congress and Space Command and others. I'm encouraged by where we're going. We'll have communications capability up there within the next year or so. Not only communications capability that benefits the military, it'll benefit industry and the civilian partners as well, and the natives in the Alaskan region and across Canada. Additionally, to have persistence, you need access and fuel. Right now, I have a stated requirement for fuel north of Dutch Harbor, Alaska, so that we can have Navy and Coast Guard vessels with more persistence and prolonged operations in the Arctic. working closely with our Canadian allies for infrastructure to house military capabilities such as aircraft, early warning aircraft give us that domain awareness that we're talking about. And we're also working hard with the services. I'm encouraged all of the services are coming up with their Arctic strategy. We're expanding opportunities to exercise. You'll see exercises next month. That's part of my campaign plan. And I just released a strategy as well. So I'd encourage you, those who have access to a classified a network, to take a look at that. And we'll have an unclassified version coming out as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. Now, General Dickinson, those Russians have been pretty busy. In December, Russia conducted a new anti-satellite missile test using a direct ascent missile designed to destroy small sats in low Earth orbit. How common are these tests? And beyond the handful of countries that currently possess this capability, are other countries developing anti-satellite missiles?
Well, thanks, Dave. You know, just in 2020, we saw Russia conduct 3 separate anti-satellite tests alone. I mean, the first was a DAA test that we saw in April. Then Russia released a on-orbit projectile near one of their own satellites in July. And as you mentioned, they conducted a second DAA sat test in December. And additionally, in February of 20, we saw Russia conduct an on-orbit testing near a U.S. government satellite. So just like in any other domain, this type of behavior, I would categorize as dangerous. And as you said, we've seen tests from other nations, and not just direct ascent anti-satellite tests or missiles, but other security threats in space. This includes kinetic kill vehicles on orbit and even electronic warfare capabilities. All this reinforces, the idea that we need to promote responsible behaviors in space and really establish norms that allow for the safe use of that domain for both us, the United States, as well as our allies and partners.
Well, thanks for that. Let me ask you a bit of a follow-up. The costs of missile defense and early warning capabilities are projected to rise over the next few decades. Could you elaborate on Spacecom's role in missile defense, and what is Spacecom doing to maximize the benefit of existing technology for long-term gains in this area?
Sure. So, Spacecom, is a key supporting combatant command for the missile defense community. As the functional management office, or FMO, of the missile warning, U.S. Spacecom, through our component, Space Operations Command, part of the U.S. Space Force, operates, the satellites as well as our ground-based radars for early warning to our missile defenders and shooters throughout not only maybe the homeland, but also the globe. And so in the Unified Command Plan of 2020, U.S. Space Command was declared the global sensor manager. So what that means is we're responsible for the planning, managing, and conducting of operations of assigned DoD space domain awareness, missile defense, and missile warning sensors. So in our role as a missile warning functional management office and global sensor manager, we are the lead to interface and advocate for the enhancement of the DoD missile warning systems, missile defense, and space domain awareness sensors. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, what we contribute. A big mission, a large mission for the command, and one that we're doing each and every day.
Well, thanks for that. General VanHerck, last year, Northcom and NORAD launched the Pathfinder program to modernize the systems used to process data from the radars and other sensors that we rely on for homeland defense. Could you expand a bit about just what this program seeks to achieve, and do you think it could be a model for other programs inside the Department of Defense?
Yeah, so it's Pathfinder is actually the name, to be clear for everybody. And it's a unique capability that we worked with DIU to field quickly that essentially takes and ingests, aggregates data from multiple systems. Data that would, in the past, have been what I would say left on the cutting room floor and not analyzed or assessed in a timely manner. Or it would have been data that was stovepiped through an individual system, individually analyzed. And so the Pathfinder program uses machine learning to help us analyze that data from multiple systems, not only military systems, but commercial systems, other government agency systems, as you fuse that data. Let me give you an example of how this can be really successful to kind of put it into perspective. And so if you remember in 2015, a gyrocopter flew down in the National Capital Region from the north and landed on the White House lawn. When you go back and look at that scenario, when you look at the systems that monitor the National Capital Region individually, no single system had full awareness or saw that gyrocopter. We took Pathfinder and applied it to the available systems, the actual data, and utilized Pathfinder capabilities to assess that data. And sure enough, there that gyrocopter was, and it was easily detected by that point. This gives us the ability to utilize existing data systems, going back to where I'm talking about domain awareness and information dominance today, to relatively in a affordable situation, analyze and assess that data. And now it's just a challenge of getting it to the right decision makers at the right time. I absolutely believe it can be a model for the Department of Defense. It lays the foundation for improved data-driven decision making and enhanced capability. And we're using it today. It's out in our fields and our sectors right now. Historically, our sectors were very manually driven, phone calls to pass data, et cetera. Today, we fuse all that data together, and we're seeing the picture much more real time and much more in an automatic type of digital environment.
Well, very good. General Dickinson, one of the goals that you identified in your strategic vision document was to integrate commercial entities into Spacecom operations. As commercial entities are playing an increasingly prominent role in U.S. space operations writ large, how do you envision that they could contribute to Homeland Defense?
Well, Dave, just as I discussed with the missile warning mission, space capabilities, are critically linked to our ability to protect and defend the homeland as the theme that we've talked about this morning. I think it's equally important to understand that given the size and the complexity of the operating environment, we simply can't go it alone. Our partnerships with our allies and with our friends in the commercial industry are central to successful military operations in the space domain. We can't operate effectively in space without our commercial partners, and we can't protect and defend the U.S. homeland without those space capabilities. Our commercial partners are fully part of the integral link between space and homeland defense. This concept is so important that I've outlined it in my commander's key tasks in my strategic vision. Yeah, one of our functional components, the Combined Force Space Component Command, which is out at Vandenberg Air Force Base, is leading the effort with our commercial integration cell, where we currently have 9 companies that are integrated out there at Vandenberg, and we're looking to expand that each and every day. And we're also working with the intelligence community, really, quite frankly, to build a stronger commercial partnership there. And then my J5, or my Strategy Plans and Policy Directorate, is working to secure key engagements with our commercial and industry partners to ensure that we are able to communicate our strategic and operational challenges we face. So the command's J8 that we're proud to have stood up now and working very hard plays a key role for us in capturing and prioritizing our requirements that our service components need to source. So industry can help us see how new and developing technologies open up our options for our requirements that just weren't possible before. So a pivotal part for the command is the integration of the commercial industry into our operations.
Well, thank you for that. Now, General VanHerck, in recent weeks, we've witnessed the tragic consequences that result from breakdowns of our vulnerable power grid. What kind of contingencies is Northcom developing with respect to threats to our nation's power grid from electromagnetic pulse or EMP attacks?
Thanks, Dave. Absolutely. I get paid to think about all kinds of those contingencies, and that's exactly what we're doing, and doing that in partnership with Homeland Security and other agencies across. Let me talk to you how I would approach that. And that did make me reflect on vulnerabilities and opportunities as well to prepare the department for such circumstances as you just described. So the way I would approach this initially would be from a standpoint of continuing to defend if it was a nefarious actor, to ensure that we defend our homelands. In my NORAD hat, that's Canada and the United States. In my NORTHCOM hat, certainly it's going to be the United States. So if there's an ongoing attack, to make sure we're postured to defeat or defend against any potential threat. The next thing I would be concerned about is my future ability to continue my mission. So my ballistic missile defense mission, for example, and ensuring there's no negative effects that have impacted ballistic missile defense, continuity of government, continuity of operations, surge layer force protection, my ability to do Noble Eagle, all those things would come to mind really quickly. And so we think about those and exercise and strategize how those fit into an overall plan to defend. And finally, and absolutely a no-fail mission, is I must be ready in such a situation to provide defense support of civil authorities. And so that's how I would flow thinking about that. I'm encouraged that we're starting to think about this at a more broad government level. It's because of the threat I started off with and described and potential intent. I'm encouraged that we're going to have a whole of government exercises, top tier exercises that will exercise taking a look at what you're talking about. One of the exercises, and it's still a few years away, that I've asked for is to flip-flop. Typically, these exercises are based on natural disasters and those kinds of things for an interagency, where I'm always wearing my support hat. It's important for us to conduct exercises where it is an attack on the homeland, where I am the supported commander by other agencies as well, and to iron out those types of command and control and responses that would be needed to the event that you described. Thank you.
All right, well, we're coming to endgame here, and for both of you, the U.S. is likely to face many years of budget constraints. If you had just 1 minute to tell Congress what your top priorities are, please take 1 minute each and tell us just what those top priorities are. General Dickinson, why don't you go first?
Well, thanks, Dave. So I got to tell you, it's a different position for me now as the combatant commander. I really look hard at obviously what the services are doing in the space domain and what they're procuring. But what I'm looking very carefully at is developing the requirements that we need to fight and win in the space domain. And so as I look at the requirements and producing those for the services to look at, I'm very interested in making sure that we continue with our investments in the integration of space domain capabilities, data fusion, processing, integrated command and control, and space warfighting capabilities. And really at the bedrock of that, or the underpin by all that, will be the robust cybersecurity posture to protect and defend those technologies. But it's a different perspective for me now, being able to look across, all commercial type activities, as well as what we're doing in the services, and really develop those requirements that I need in order to get the assets that I need for my mission.
Thank you. General VanHerck.
Thanks, General Deptula. On the 16th of March, I'll testify in front of the SASC and cover exactly what you're asking me to cover here. Increased domain awareness is the top of my IPL. As I said, that's from undersea to sea, land, airspace, cyberspace, and taking that domain awareness, utilizing capabilities to provide information dominance. We need to set the foundation now, because using machine learning and artificial intelligence will absolutely challenge some policy decisions. We need to set that foundation right now so that we're ahead of the game and we don't field capabilities where there's concern about machines providing solutions and opportunities for us in the military dimension. We need to focus on competition as whole of a nation long-term with a focus on China. Right now, I think we are getting that way. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, but this will require a whole nation effort to get after the problem long-term, to compete, an integrated, synchronized strategy to get after that. To go faster and accept a little bit of risk to be able to go faster within the department. To go fast, you have to fail at times, and I believe that's acceptable. It's get back up on your feet and keep going. So that's what I would tell them. That's crucial for us.
Well, thanks very much, General VanHerck. And gentlemen, we've come to the end of this virtual Aerospace Warfare Symposium event. Thanks again to both of you for your comments on these issues, and clearly from the discussion today, It's very evident that Spacecom and Northcom are very fortunate to have you both leading these critical commands. So on behalf of all of us at the Air Force Association, we wish you the very best. And from the Mitchell Institute of Aerospace Studies, we hope that you both have a great aerospace power kind of day.